Hey guys, how you doing today? Just got off work, on my way home. As always, recording. Um, I think the big news that's going on today, and there's quite a few things to pick and choose from, but I think because of my passion project of the basic income, right? Because of the basic income, I have to respond to the propaganda article that comes out of the National Post. And let's be real, right? The National Post is owned by a billionaire class, so the information that's coming out of it, and the people who write for it, are working on behalf of the billionaire class without a doubt. You got hack propagandists like Kelly McFarland, John Ivison, like these guys. They've sold out to a billionaire class, and they're just propagandists. So when the National Post writes about the basic income, it is important to begin at being extremely skeptical. If I met anybody who took the National Post at face value, it'd be like, oh, you believe in Bat Boy because the National Enquirer said it? Like, that's the kind of level we're talking about. But that said, it's extremely crucial that the National Post is writing about a basic income, right? Because that means that the issue of a basic income has become so mainstream, and it exists in the mainstream, that they can't ignore it, right? They have to respond to it. So they release this article. And because they're adept propagandists, they're not bad propagandists, they're adept propagandists. And like any effective liar, what they do is everything they say is true. It's what they omit, right? And as long as they can suck you in to believing that what they say is the full picture, right? That they're not lying. All of that is true. That all of the things I said are true. Just ignore all of this big pile of other evidence that's over here, and you can go along with this obviously nonsense narrative that they're creating. So I'll just take you through it. Right here are the three issues that this propaganda article from the National Post puts forward. Issue 1: cost. The basic income will cost $44 billion. Oh, big red flag, whole huge thing. The basic income will cost $44 billion. Oh my God, basic income, $44 billion. Of course, the lie of omission here is that the corporate cash hoard right now is $630 billion, right? I shouldn't say right now. That's as of 2014. The business class wisely stopped reporting on this number because they know it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and is the largest talking point that anyone with a brain in their head should be mentioning, right? Corporate interests are hoarding at least $500 billion, right? $630 billion. And we're supposed to take seriously $44 billion as an expense, as a cost. Are you kidding? Like, are you fucking out of your mind? I mean, obviously, the billionaire class is out of their mind, but the idea that basically fundamentally what this National Post article is saying is we can afford to allow corporate interests in the wealthy to hoard and extract $630 billion, jam it into offshore accounts, invest it nowhere, make sure that no one has access to it, do nothing with it. That's affordable. Taking more than a tenth of that, though, right? Sorry, taking less than a tenth of that. $44 billion is less than a tenth than $630 billion. But taking less than a tenth of that and actually circulating it in the economy with the intention of helping people and feeding and clothing people, that's unaffordable. So, propaganda point number 1 defeated. The basic income is not only affordable, it's completely necessary. And actually, I'll go even deeper. $44 billion. Oh my God, it's such a huge number. So for the system that we have now, in Ontario alone, we're spending $37 billion, right? And if you just extend that to other provinces and do basic math, you can figure out pretty quickly, we're spending more for the system we have now than the basic income, which is intended to resolve these issues of poverty. That's emergency services, food banks, right? Policing, right? All the stuff that's there to deal with the issue, the issues that poverty creates, right? Poor people don't just disappear. They don't just vanish. It's not free to take care of them, to have shelters, to have food banks, these sorts of things. That's why the food banks of Canada have recommended a basic income and the elimination of the food banks of Canada, right? Because they understand that a food bank system is more expensive to maintain than a basic income is, which makes obvious sense, right? You're paying people to distribute food, you're paying people to organize food, you're paying rent on a building, right? So this mythical idea that a basic income is somehow expensive, you can only maintain that through the lie of omission. You can just by looking at the number 44 billion and saying, that's a lot of money! 44 billion is a lot of money! And if you don't think about it for a second, and if you don't have a brain in your head, and if you let propagandists run what happens in here, and you don't actually think critically or skeptically, and just act like a gullible rube, sure, $44 billion is a lot of money. $630 billion is also a lot of money. So's $37 billion, which is what we're paying now in Ontario alone for the system we have now. So propaganda point number one defeated completely, embarrassingly so. Like, conservatism is a dead ideology. There you have it. Point number two that they bring up, incentives. Here's where the article gets like the most propagandistic. So in 2012, there was a study done by an economist in Quebec. And this one individual study, done one time, came to the conclusion, wrongly, in my view, that a basic income will disincentivize work. Now, this is actually in counter to the consensus view. There have been several economic studies that have been done on the impact of a basic income. There have been several pilot projects done. There's been a lot of information that's come out about the basic income, and the general consensus is that it does not disincentivize work. That the people who are disincentivized to work are people who go back to school, which is a social benefit without a doubt, or things like single mothers who choose to stay home to raise their children, which again, pretty major social benefit. And so what the National Post is doing here is the same as taking a single study. First of all, just like taking one single study and using that as the basis to conclude, especially when that study runs against the general consensus, is dishonest, right? You are intellectually fraudulent to begin with, simply by using a single study instead of the consensus view. And what they're doing is not different than taking a study funded by the oil industry, a single study funded by the oil industry, in order to claim that climate change is not an issue, right? It's the same exact sort of strategy. It's dishonest, it's propagandistic, and the National Post should be ashamed of themselves for publishing such absolute and overt nonsense. So point number two, conservatism is a dead ideology. There you have it. Point three, cuts is what they called it. That, well, politicians will use the basic income as a argument to fuel future cuts. This isn't so much an argument against the basic income as it is simply an overt threat. And it should be taken as that. Well, more as a warning and a threat, that if you insist on passing the basic income, then we're going to go after you and start a class war. And we're going to take away your health care. We're going to take away these things because now you can eat and feed yourself without having to sell yourself to a billionaire-dominated market. And this again just points in that conservatism is a dead ideology, right? Like it's this their only response to people are getting food and people are having shelter now. Well, better assault them, better attack them. I mean, do you need more evidence to show you that conservatism is a dead ideology? Because there it is, like in black and white. They're outright threatening to cut your social services, cut funding to the post office, cut funding to your healthcare system, cut funding to all of this kind of stuff, right? It's a threat that's on the table, and yet 25 to 30% of the society seems to go along with this nonsense. Garbage. And it is garbage, right? Like, it's just total garbage that unfortunately can't be dismissed, because that's where the billionaire class has captured like 25% of the society. And I'm done responding to the National Post article now, which is just strictly a propaganda article. Like, the basic income is not only affordable, it not only does not disincentivize work, the only the only people who will use it as a justification for future cuts are sociopaths, i.e. billionaires, right? And if we allow them to do that, then we deserve it, right? And if these people take power, then we're extremely gullible. And Canadians are extremely gullible, right? Like, we listen to a hack like Doug Ford, right? We're a very gullible people. You know, we buy into all kinds of ridiculous ideas. And like this is a fine time to talk about like the cyclical nature of the economy, right? So one of the lies that the right tries to shove down our throats is that spent money vanishes from an economy, right? They'll say something like a basic income costs $44 billion annually. Well, how are you going to pay for that? Over 44 plus 44 plus 44. Oh my goodness, it's so much money. And it's like, that's not how it works. Like $44 billion annually is what you're setting aside, but the economy works in a cycle, right? So the government allots $44 billion for this program. The money gets spent, right? So I receive the money. I spend it on a tailor, who then turns around and spends it elsewhere, who then turns around and spends it elsewhere, who then turns around and spends it elsewhere. And all of that money gets taxed throughout that whole process, right? All that money receives taxation, returning it to the government for redistribution. And that happens on an annual cycle. We file taxes annually for a reason, right? So the economy works on a cycle. The right doesn't want you to know that. The right doesn't want you to think about that. The right wants you to think that, if I spend my money in a grocery store, that money vanishes and it's gone forever, right? No, that money cycles and circulates and is taxed and returns to the government for redistribution. That's how monetary policy works. And there's all kinds of lies that exist like this. Like, the right needs you to believe that governments are businesses, that a deficit is bad. Instead of simply a measurement of what government spending has been, it needs to be treated as if it's a loan, which, when you actually stop and think about that, is the stupidest thing ever, right? Government deficits are not loans. They don't need to be paid back. They're not. It's just a measure of how the government has spent its money. That's what it is. It's like insisting that you're playing a game of basketball and you might run out of points. They've scored almost 100 points. They might run out of points. Got to score less, right? Like, what are you talking about? Like, for real, what are you talking about? And a deficit is simply like, it's a surplus that exists in the private sector. Like, if the government prints $100 billion and puts it in the private sector, that's $100 billion surplus that exists in the private sector, right? For the benefit of the people who receive it, right? If you print $100 billion and give it to CEOs, they're just going to jam it in an offshore account somewhere and forget about it. But if you print $100 billion and give it to everyday citizens, right? Just give it to people who are living their lives, they're going to spend it. They're going to spend it amongst themselves. And they're going to trade goods and services for it. And they're going to improve their lot. And things are going to get better for them. And then, of course, eventually all that money ends up in the coffers of corporate power, because that's how the society has been structured. Which is where I think the taxation should be done. Like, I'm generally of the opinion that we should be lowering income taxes for everyone across the entire board. Income taxes should be lowered. The general sales tax should be lowered. Taxation generally should be lowered, right? I'm a big believer in that, because the burden of taxation should fall onto the inert money that's doing nothing, right? I have come to believe that there is enough money that's just being piled into inert offshore accounts that help no one do nothing and facilitate no benefit to even the person collecting it, that if we shifted the entire burden of taxation onto that activity, we could shift it away from earnings, we could shift it away from spending, we shift it away from our day-to-day activities completely, and it would just completely fall into, oh, are you just hoarding money offshore for no reason? Oh, okay, we'll just take that money. We're not interested in you hoarding money. Like, who cares about that? How does that help anybody? And that's where the first source of taxation should exist. It's like if you have like if you think about money as blood in the body, right? And the heart is the government, right? And the government pumps the blood through the system, right? And the blood goes through and then it circulates back to the heart. Now, if blood started to pool somewhere in the body, that could kill you. That would be a major, major problem. And the first thing that you would want to do, if you were saying, oh yeah, we need to take blood away from parts of the system to send it back, the first place you would want that to come from is, well, where's the blood pooling? We're not interested in that. Pooling blood not only helps nothing, it can actually kill you and cause you problems, which is exactly what we're seeing in this society here. Like, money needs to flow. It needs to flow. And once it starts to pool, it's not only is it extracted from the economy, which makes it harder for people to get money and harder for people to actually spend money. It makes it harder for the government to actually successfully tax people, because it's got to sort of step around this whole idea that, like, you guys are just pooling money, you're just hoarding money. Like, just admit it, do something about it, pass a basic income to help people. It'd be very, very, I mean, it's turning out to not be, I mean, it'd be simple to do, but to convince people to do it has been a completely other thing. Because, like, there was a RAND study that just came out. This is another thing worth talking about. So the RAND Institute did a study, and they realized, oh man, there's been this enormous transfer of wealth up to the very top. There should be, if things were equal, there would be 2.5 trillion more dollars in the middle class economy, but the wealth has been transferred, and we're shocked by this. That's their language. They said, we're shocked by this. I'm like, I think at this stage, if you're using language like you're shocked to see that there's been an enormous transfer of wealth up to the top, it's because you're delusional. It's because you're out of touch with reality. It's because you don't know what's going on. And it's because you have no idea what the lives of everyday people are at this stage in the game. What we need is a basic income. We need to ensure that people have a floor to stand on, that they can secure rent and shelter without needing to sell themselves to a billionaire-dominated market, which is the arrangement we have now. Anyway, guys, like, share, subscribe, right? The likes and the subscribing really warm my heart, make me feel good about myself. Yeah, go have a drink, have a smoke, ask that girl out, ask that guy out, right? Find love, find what you can in this crazy, insane world. Go meet your neighbors. Go meet your neighbors. I'm a big believer of this. This is becoming my sign-off, because I think it is actually the most important action you can do. If you're sitting there going like, man, the world's going to hell, what can I do about it? You can go meet your neighbors. You can go meet your neighbors. Because when the crises start, when the building needs to be evacuated, right? When the building needs to be evacuated, when the bells are ringing, when things are going crazy, you want to have at least introduced yourself to the people that you will be relying on. Because when shit goes crazy, it's the people across the hall that are the people you need to lean on and rely on. So you should know their names, at the very least. Make a batch of cookies, send them on over. All right, guys, I love you all. Good luck. Godspeed. Have fun.